Joe, should I tell, like, to the camera what, happened down? We're down at Saltpond Station, right outside Philadelphia, at an alleged Satan worshiping warehouse. Now, there hasn't been any actual acts of rituals recorded down here for about 2 years now. But Roxborough, it's right outside Roxborough, did have a problem with satanic cults in here a few years back. Bad enough that they had the Roman Catholic Church start a committee on it. Why don't we come in and take a look? An idea of how deep this hole is. Look out, Dave. My spit. Alright, that wasn't even touching the ground. Why don't we bring a flashlight? We don't have a flashlight, but by looking down here, the floor supports are actual arches that you probably can't see without the camera, without light down there. It's about a 15-foot drop from here down to underground tunnels that we're really not sure how far they lead. We haven't been down there yet. The actual building we're standing in, from what I can see, used to be a church at one point. Because the road that runs out along the river that we were at on before, that we were originally filming from, runs all the way into Philadelphia. And before Roxborough had its main street that runs from Philly all the way down to Collegeville, they only ran along this with horse and buggy. So probably at one time this was a Roman Catholic church. And at the turn of the century, Roman Catholic Church needed quite a bit of money to keep its services going. And since at that time they were building roads further up from the river, they really didn't need this. So they sold it to steel mills and paper mills down along the river. The ceiling was probably originally ripped off because it was worth money. If you can tape over along the sides, you can see where the original wall ended and where the old ceiling started, but where they put the new one on. So this was actually a cathedral at one time. I'm not an art major, so I wouldn't know what Gothic design the windows are, but they are Gothic. The ceiling that's on there now is like makeshift design. That wasn't built with the rest of it. The rest of this is stone and ceramic. That's metal and fiberglass, most likely.
Plus one.
So, we follow you down this way.
Here's the important part, pay attention.
When we originally came in, I had mentioned something about a satanic cult. A few years back, Roxborough had a big problem with a satanic cult that originally started by entering old sewer lines that used to be in the city, and they would operate below the street. And they would have random cases of like homeless people disappearing, and teenagers that were, trouble at home. They would join the cult and be ritually murdered or sacrificed. Roxborough police and governor and judicial heads denied whatever was going on. They didn't want anyone to they didn't want anyone to know. But people couldn't deny it. So once again, they got the church to fight it, but the church was pretty much unfactual in their findings. They did come up with one murder that they could link to the cult, but it never went anywhere because church and state, the police didn't want to help out because it was the church. The cult's believed to have about 300 members, and what the police did to stop public outrage was to seal up most of the sewer holes. But if we go out here later on, I can show you some of the sewer holes that they didn't seal up. They just basically threw dirt and debris down. If you want to get back through, you can just throw it out of the way. But we have a metal plate right here, and people that live along the river, not too far away from here, not even a quarter mile away, that used to come down here because there is a walk path. The plate is people here in white sheets when before any of the sand and dirt was here, performing some type of sacrifice. And below me is some type of hollow chasm that I guess the police filled in, some type of government heads filled in to stop public outcries, but it didn't work. Now, if we look around here, you see graffiti all over the walls, but what we have behind me isn't spray paint. This is actual latex paint. It peels off. Someone paid money to come down here and paint this mural. From what I've read, each one of these depicts a different member of a cult, and I'm only sure of 3 on the wall, actually 4 on the wall. This would be the head of the cult. He's wearing some type of mask that was popular during 16th century in witches' cults. The head of the cult would wear the mask and do a dance around this member, who would be the inductee. They don't have a head because it's the unknown member. He would do a dance, and they would be induced by drugs. So the dance would be a spiritual dance, a rising. To induct them, it would almost be, it's basically brainwashing. What we have here is a depiction of Christ. This is the facial. This wasn't originally here. Someone spray painted on this, unfortunately. This is a picture of Christ. Christ is a fallen angel. They don't see him as the Son of God, but as a fallen angel. And this is a nurse figure. I'm not sure where it finally played a role, because it surely wasn't around the 16th century. But at the turn of the century in American cults, I guess the nurse was actually brought in as a figurehead of kindness and goodwill, which is pretty much bullshit, because there's not an actual member. I don't know why it's on the wall. The rest of these paintings, if you look around...
Details kind of, you actually see that to make out the...
Yeah, well, the details on the walls are surreal. If you look at each face, there's a different expression, but it disappears. It's not very stable. This one, you have half the face with hair coming down, which is, it was really detailed. If you take a look, can you get a close-up? If you take a close-up of this, it's very detailed. So someone came down here and took their time with what they were doing. The legs are even detailed down to the legs. For some reason, this one is masked and gagged. We're really not sure why. I don't know enough about it to answer any of those questions or give explanations for it. But it's just strange that a worshiping house of God at one time, a Catholic Roman God, not a pagan God, was somehow turned into a den of Satan. I'm inquisitive and interested in what's below the floors, because I was originally gained interest in this by a friend who came down here several months ago, before they had laid any of the metal work on the floor and the dirt to fill in the steps, which I haven't showed you yet, and actually went down 2 or 3 floors. They couldn't find any other way down, but they did hear chanting up to a year ago. So that was as early as a year ago that they heard people below them. There's believed to be 5 or 6 sub-basements to the building. The building was Roman Catholic Church, and then sold to a steel mill, which we can't see, but there is a plaque up on the main crossbeam.
This one, like, look at that. It's so fucking fucked up. What does it say right there?
I don't know, that's spray paint. It says Debbie. The big thing about this was the church sold it to a steel mill. And when the steel... Picture? All the way through? Okay, I'm standing behind the building, which I've somehow... I'm not positive, but I deducted it to be what was a church at one time. If we have any shots of the windows earlier, it's a Gothic design. And if we look at the doorway, right above the doorway, we have a halo design, which used to have a stained glass coming through it. So when the sun would come through, the sun would come through the stained glass windows above each doorway, and they're above each doorway inside, even the doorways that are bricked, which is common of churches. But if we turn around, these were the changing rooms for clergymen inside, which are now wrecked. So there was a fire here at one point. There must have been, for it to be like this. It's burnt out now. But behind us, over here, we have a building, which must have been a housing for the priests where they slept. Can you see it through the camera? Directly back there. It is. Okay. All this up here is actually raised from the road down below by a wall and separated. So this must have been a garden at one point. It must have been cleared and cut, because these trees are still fairly small, considering that it probably wasn't a church that long ago. These are young. This was probably some type of garden or walkthrough to the preach quarters at that building, which we can't tape in because it's too dark. We can get the only opening, but it wouldn't be much for footage. What I want to take you to right now is the main thing that leads me to conclude that this was a church, and that's the garden in the back.
There was a fire hydrant in that.